Most people think power is loud. It's not. The boardroom proves this every single day. The person talking the most is rarely the one in control. They're defending, they're proving, they're reacting. 99% of people speak to fill the void. 1% let the void do the work. You were raised in a culture that told you to speak up, to share your thoughts, to have a voice. That was the trap, because the ones who taught you that, they needed you loud. Loud is predictable. Loud is manageable. Loud is weak. Silence is a weapon, not weakness. This isn't for everyone. If you need to be liked, leave now. If you need validation, this will hurt. But if you're still here, you already know something the crowd doesn't. Welcome to the 1%. You were taught to explain yourself. That was the trap. From childhood, you were conditioned to justify every action. Your parents asked why. Your teachers demanded explanations. Your friends expected you to defend your choices. And you learned that good people explain. Honest people clarify. Strong people make their case. They lied to you. Every time you explain, you give away power. Not because explanation is inherently weak, but because it reveals your need for approval. And need is the currency of control. Psychological research on social signals confirms this. Silence functions as a powerful social signal that communicates confidence and status. When you remain silent, you're not withholding information. You're transmitting control. Think about the last time you watched a CEO in a high-stakes meeting. The ones who survive don't explain their decisions. They announce them. Then they go quiet. And in that silence, everyone else scrambles to interpret, to adjust, to align. The silence forces them to fill the void. And in filling that void, they reveal everything. Their fears, their loyalties, their weaknesses. This is the invisible architecture of power. In American corporate culture, the person who talks the least often holds the most leverage. Because Americans are terrified of silence in conversation. It feels like failure, like something's broken. So they talk, they over-explain, they reveal. And the person who can sit in that silence, who can let it hang in the air like smoke, that person owns the room. The weak explain. The strong let others guess. A grandmaster doesn't narrate their chess moves. A predator doesn't announce its presence before the strike. Power doesn't advertise. It simply is. And silence is its natural state. You think silence is absence. It's not. Silence is presence so concentrated that it bends everything around it. When you stop talking, people start listening differently. Not to your words, because there are none. To your position, your stillness, your refusal to play the game they expect. Research on group communication dynamics shows that silence carries distinct psychological weight. It's not neutral, it's loaded. And the person who controls it controls the narrative, even without speaking, especially without speaking. Here's what actually happens when you go silent. The other person's mind races. They wonder if you're angry, if you disagree, if you're judging them, if they said something wrong. Their imagination does more damage than any words you could use. And the beautiful part? You didn't lift a finger. Their own psychology worked against them. This is why explaining feels like losing. Because it is. The moment you justify, you've accepted their frame. You've agreed that you owe them an answer. You've submitted to their authority to demand one. Silence refuses the frame entirely. It says, I don't owe you my thoughts. I don't need your understanding. I exist independently of your approval. And that independence? That's what they can't touch. That's what they can't manipulate. That's power in its purest form. Most people will never understand this. They'll keep talking, keep explaining, keep giving away pieces of themselves in exchange for momentary comfort. Let them. You're not most people. You're learning a different language now. The language of strategic silence. The language of control. Silence forces others to fill the void. And in that void, you learn everything. There are 7 moments where silence matters more than any trick. These aren't theoretical. You've lived them. You've failed most of them. Now you'll recognize them, and recognition is the first step to control. Moment 1. When someone accuses you. Picture this. You're in a meeting. A colleague throws you under the bus, points at a mistake, implies you're incompetent, suggests you dropped the ball. Everyone's looking at you now, waiting. 99% of people do the same thing. They panic. They scramble. They launch into a detailed explanation of what actually happened. They pull up emails. They reconstruct timelines. They name other people involved. They defend, and with every word, they lose. Because the accuser doesn't want the truth. They want your reaction. They want to see you scramble. They want evidence of your fear. Every word you speak is ammunition. Every detail you provide is a new angle for attack. Every defense you mount proves you're defensive. The 1% do something different. They go completely silent. They make eye contact. They hold it. They let the accusation hang in the air like a bad smell. They let everyone sit in the discomfort of it. And here's what happens. The accuser keeps talking. They have to. Because your silence creates a vacuum they can't stand. So they elaborate. They add details. They overreach. And eventually, they expose themselves. Their motive becomes clear. Their exaggeration becomes obvious. Their insecurity shows. Social signals research demonstrates that silence in response to accusation communicates supreme confidence. It signals that the accusation is so beneath you, it doesn't warrant a response. Not because you're hiding, because you're above it. The accuser needs your reaction more than you need their approval. Moment 2. When you're being tested, not attacked. This one's subtle. Your boss leans back in their chair and says, "I'm not sure you can handle this project." Your business partner raises an eyebrow at your proposal. Your colleague makes a dismissive comment about your idea. It feels like an attack. Your body responds like it's an attack. Adrenaline spikes. Your jaw tightens. You want to fire back. You want to prove them wrong immediately. But it's not an attack. It's a test. 99% miss this distinction entirely. They react with anger. They defend their competence. They list their qualifications. They get emotional. And in doing so, they fail the test spectacularly. Because the test wasn't about your ability. It was about your emotional control. Power dynamics research shows that subtle provocations function as social assessments of status. People in positions of authority use these micro-challenges to gauge who can handle pressure, who stays calm under fire, who controls their reactions. The 1% recognize the test instantly. They don't take the bait. They go silent. They might smile slightly. They might nod once. But they don't speak. They don't justify. They don't defend. They simply absorb the statement and move on. And that silence does something powerful. It communicates. Your doubt doesn't disturb me. Your skepticism doesn't require my correction. I'm so secure in my capability that your test is irrelevant. In American culture, this is the ultimate strength signal. Because Americans are conditioned to prove themselves constantly, to explain their worth, to defend their position. The person who doesn't need to do any of that, that person operates on a different level. If you react, you're being trained. If you observe, you're in control. You've been in both these moments, multiple times, and you reacted. You explained. You defended. Now you know why you felt drained afterward, why you felt like you lost something even when you won the argument. Because you did lose something. You lost frame. You lost power. You gave it away with every word, not anymore. Now you recognize the pattern. Now you see the test. Now you know the move. Silence. The pattern deepens. These next moments aren't about defending against others. They're about what you do when you realize you've been bleeding power slowly, without even knowing it. Moment 3. When you lose respect, you feel it before you see it. Colleagues stop asking your opinion in meetings. Your boss assigns you smaller projects. Friends make plans without checking if you're available. Nobody's openly hostile. Nothing dramatic happened. But the shift is real. Your first instinct? Talk more. Contribute more. Make yourself visible. Prove your value. Explain what you've been working on. Remind people of your accomplishments. Seek recognition. Ask for validation. This is how 99% respond to lost respect. And it's exactly wrong. Because respect isn't something you can demand. It's not something you can explain yourself into. Research on social respect dynamics confirms this. Respect is granted based on perceived status and behavior, not on justification. The more you seek it, the more it recedes. Every time you over-explain your value, you decrease it. Every time you seek acknowledgement, you signal that you need external validation to function. And need is the opposite of respect. The 1% do something counterintuitive. They go silent. They pull back. They reduce their presence. They stop volunteering information. They stop seeking approval. They let people feel their absence. And something strange happens. People start noticing, not because you're doing more, because you're doing less. Your silence creates a void, and voids demand to be filled. People start wondering where you went, what you're thinking, whether they did something wrong. In Western individualist culture, this withdrawal of attention is particularly potent, because attention is the primary currency. And when you stop giving it freely, its value skyrockets. You didn't lose respect. You gave it away slowly. Stop giving. Moment 4. When someone wants your attention, your phone lights up. We need to talk. A colleague corners you. Do you have a minute? A friend texts. Emergency. Call me now. The demand is implicit. Drop what you're doing. Focus on me. Respond immediately. 99% comply. They drop everything. They make themselves available. They feel obligated. Because they've been taught that being responsive means being good, being helpful, being a team player. But here's what's really happening. Every time you respond on someone else's timeline, you teach them that their time is more valuable than yours. You establish a hierarchy, and you're not at the top of it. Attention is currency, more valuable than money in many contexts. Because you can always make more money. You can't make more time. And whoever controls the timing of interaction controls the power dynamic. Social signals research identifies response timing as a critical indicator of status. High-status individuals respond when it suits them. Low-status individuals respond when demanded. The 1% delay. Not out of spite, not to play games, but as a matter of principle. They finish what they're doing. They respond when they're ready. They don't explain the delay. They don't apologize for it. They simply operate on their own schedule. And watch what happens. The emergency resolves itself. The urgent conversation loses its urgency. The person learns that demanding your immediate attention doesn't work. They adjust, they wait, They respect your boundary because you enforced it silently. In a culture that glorifies availability and constant connectivity, the person who controls their accessibility controls their perceived value. Silence isn't just refusing to speak. It's refusing to dance when someone else plays music. Your attention is the most valuable thing you own. Stop giving it for free. These moments are getting harder, aren't they? Because they require you to do the opposite of what feels natural, what feels kind, what feels cooperative. But you're not here to be comfortable. You're here to understand how power actually works. And power doesn't operate on feelings. It operates on position, on leverage, on control. Keep going. The next level is where most people break. We're past the surface now. These next moments attack something deeper. Your need to be understood. Your need to be right. These are the addictions that keep you powerless. Time to cut them out. Moment 5. When you're about to explain yourself. Someone misunderstands you. Completely. They think you meant something you didn't. They interpret your action incorrectly. They've built an entire narrative in their head, and it's wrong. You feel it rising, that overwhelming urge to correct them, to clarify, to say, "No, that's not what I meant. Let me explain." The words are already forming. Your mouth is opening. Stop. 99% give in to this urge every single time. They explain extensively. They justify their intentions. They walk the other person through their thought process. What I actually meant was, if you understood the context, let me be clear. And every word makes them smaller because explanation is defense, and defense is the language of the accused. When you explain yourself, you're accepting the premise that you owe someone your internal logic, that your actions require their approval to be valid, that you're guilty until proven innocent in the court of their judgment. The 1% pause. They breathe. They let the misunderstanding exist. They stay silent. And here's the crucial insight from social signals research. When you remain silent in the face of misunderstanding, you force the other person to sit with their interpretation. Without your correction, they have to rely on observation, on your subsequent actions, on reality itself. And reality has a way of correcting misunderstandings more powerfully than words ever could. Silence says, "I don't owe you an explanation. My actions speak for themselves. Interpret them as you will. I remain unchanged by your interpretation." This is terrifying for most people, because we're conditioned to believe that being misunderstood is dangerous, that we need everyone to see us accurately, that misunderstanding leads to disaster. It doesn't. Misunderstanding leads to recalibration. The person who misunderstood you will either adjust based on evidence, or they won't. Either way, it's not your responsibility to manage their perception. That's the ultimate freedom. The moment you explain, you lose. Let them wonder. Moment 6. When you want to prove you're right. You're in an argument. Could be professional, could be personal, doesn't matter. You know you're right. You have evidence. You have logic. The other person is clearly, demonstrably wrong. And they won't admit it, so you push. You present more evidence. You break down your logic step by step. You bring in examples. You cite sources. You corner them with reason. You're going to make them admit you're right if it takes all night. This is what 99% do. They escalate. They invest enormous energy into winning the argument, into forcing acknowledgement, into being proven correct. And they waste everything. Because being right and proving you're right are two different games. One builds power, one wastes it. Research on power and status confirms that high-status individuals don't need to prove correctness. Their status is demonstrated through outcome, not argument. They operate on a different currency entirely. When you argue, you're spending energy. When you prove, you're seeking validation. When you force admission, you're revealing need. And all of that's weakness disguised as strength. The 1% make a different choice. They state their position once, clearly. Then they go silent. They exit the argument. They let time do the proving. Because reality doesn't need your advocacy. If you're right, events will demonstrate it. If you're wrong, no amount of arguing will change that. Either way, your energy is better spent building than debating. This is especially powerful in Western culture, where intellectual argument is often mistaken for actual accomplishment. People spend hours debating strategy in conference rooms. The person who excuses themselves and starts executing? That person doesn't need to win the argument. They'll win the results. Silence in this moment says, I don't need your validation. I don't need you to admit I'm correct. I know what I know. Reality will speak for itself. And when it does, I won't say, I told you so, because I'll be too busy moving forward. Being right and proving you're right are two different games. One builds power. One wastes it. You're feeling it now, aren't you? That resistance. That voice saying, but sometimes you have to explain. Sometimes you have to prove your point. Sometimes silence is just letting people stay wrong. That voice is your conditioning. It's the part of you that still believes power comes from being understood, from being acknowledged, from being proven correct. It doesn't. Power comes from outcome, from position, from the ability to act independently of others' opinions. And silence is how you protect that ability. One more moment. The final one. This is where you decide who you actually are. Moment 7. When silence becomes your identity. This isn't a single moment anymore. It's a state. You've practiced silence in accusations, in tests, in misunderstandings, in arguments. You've pulled back. You've stopped explaining. You've stopped proving. You've stopped seeking. And now you're here, in the quiet. And it's lonely. People don't understand you anymore. They used to be able to read you, predict you, know what you were thinking. Now you're opaque. They make comments. You've changed. You're different. You used to be more open. They're not wrong. You are different. But they say it like it's a problem. 99% panic at this stage. They feel the isolation and interpret it as failure. They think they've gone too far, become too cold, lost themselves. So they backpedal. They start talking again. They explain their silence. They try to reassure everyone that they're still the same person. They trade the power they've built for the comfort of being understood. And they go right back to where they started. Powerless. The 1% make peace with it. They accept the loneliness. They embrace it. They understand this is the price. Not a bug, a feature. Because the kind of power we're discussing doesn't coexist with constant approval. It doesn't work if everyone likes you. It doesn't function if you need to be understood. This is where silence stops being a tactic and becomes identity. You're not using silence anymore. You are silence. It's woven into how you process information, how you make decisions, how you move through the world. According to research on social signals and power dynamics, individuals who operate at the highest levels of influence no longer perform power. They embody it. Silence isn't a tool they pick up. It's the default state they return to. You don't need external signals to confirm your position. You don't need people to understand your moves. You don't need validation because you've built something more valuable. self-sufficiency, autonomy, the ability to act without requiring anyone else's permission or approval. This is lonely. Let's be clear about that. When you stop explaining yourself, most people drift away. They can't handle the ambiguity. They need you to be readable, predictable. When you won't give them that, they leave. And you let them. Because you're not here to be loved. You're here to be respected. And respect doesn't require understanding. It requires recognition of capability, of boundary, of power. Silence isn't a trick. It's who you become when you stop needing validation. But there's a line, and you need to see it clearly. Because crossing it doesn't make you powerful. It makes you alone. Permanently, uselessly, destructively. Silence without empathy is just cruelty. Power without purpose is just isolation. If you're using these principles to hurt people, to manipulate for sport, to enjoy watching others struggle while you remain unmoved, you're not operating from strength. You're operating from damage. There's a difference between strategic silence and emotional unavailability, between holding your position and abandoning human connection entirely, between being selective with your energy and becoming a black hole that consumes without giving. Cross that line, and you're not powerful, you're alone. And there's a difference. Western culture talks a lot about authentic leadership, about bringing your whole self, about vulnerability. And there's value in that. But here's the twist most people won't tell you. Authenticity is overrated when you're playing for power. Not because you should be fake, but because strategic opacity serves you better than total transparency. The goal isn't to become a robot. It's to become selective, intentional, controlled. You can still have deep relationships, but you choose them carefully. You can still be generous, but you decide when and with whom. You can still be warm, but you determine who earns that warmth. Use this to protect yourself, not to destroy others. Use silence to maintain your position, not to inflict pain. Use strategic withdrawal to preserve your energy, not to punish people for existing. Know the line, respect it. But if you're still here, if you've made it this far, if you haven't clicked away because this makes you uncomfortable, you already know which side of the line you're on. You're not looking for permission to be cruel. You're looking for permission to stop being used, to stop giving yourself away in pieces, to stop explaining your existence to people who will never understand it anyway. You're not here to be loved. You're here to be respected. And respect is earned through boundary, through consistency, through the quiet power of someone who doesn't need anything from you. If you made it here, you're different. Most people left 3 minutes ago. They couldn't handle the discomfort. They went back to the crowd, back to the noise, back to the safety of being understood. You didn't. Subscribe if you want to go deeper. Don't if you're satisfied staying where you are. No pressure, no manipulation, just a simple choice. Most people will forget this by tomorrow. They'll go back to explaining themselves, back to proving themselves, back to seeking validation from people who don't matter. You won't. Welcome to the 1%.